Hello, folks. We are here with the IT Business Podcast. My guest tonight, Rob Ray, and we are going to start right after this. Hello, friends. Uncle Marv here with another episode of the IT Business Podcast presented by NetAlly. This show is for managed service providers and IT professionals where we help you learn how to protect and serve your clients' networks better, smarter, and faster. This is the weekly Wednesday live show, and I am joined by the Michael Jordan of the channel, the Oprah of the airwaves, the incomparable Rob Ray with Pax8. Rob, how are you?
I am awesome. Thank you very much, Mark. It's an honor to be in the same realm as Michael Jordan and Oprah Winfrey. I think that's a little exaggeration, but thank you.
Well, it is. But hey, what was probably the biggest thing happening in November and December of 2022 than the entire tech industry waiting to find out where does Rob Ray go?
Was lots of really cool speculation. I heard a lot of the rumors too. It was kind of neat to see some of the rumors going around. I was thinking, it'd be kind of cool. We were joking around one night about doing kind of like the decision like LeBron did and having like, the hats out with all the different vendors on it and then finally selecting one and putting it on. But that sounded like a really like a-hole thing to do. So we decided not to do it.
You know what you could have done? You could have brought together a whole bunch of your favorite MSPs and had them in the audience.
Yeah.
Could have had all the banners up of all the vendors.
Yeah, that's way too egotistical for me. That's for sure. So way too arrogant.
Yeah. Now, for those who do not know, Rob Ray is now the corporate vice president of communities and ecosystems at Pax8. We mostly know him as the channel chief at Datto. And Rob, I don't know if you remember this, but I met you all the way back in 2015, or was it 2016? You were down here in Florida at a ChannelCon from CompTIA the year that Peyton Manning showed up.
Oh, yes. Okay. Absolutely. I remember that event because they had him as the keynote.
Right.
And I got an opportunity to go backstage and meet him. And I can't remember why, but I was in a really bad mood. I'm not sure why, but I remember going up and finally it was my chance to meet him. And I walked up to shake his hand, and the man's hands are massive. Like it was like shaking hands with a tennis racket. That's what I remember about it specifically. Yeah. I think it was one of his first keynotes. It was slightly like right after his retirement.
It was the first big one that I remember after his retirement. And it was interesting to see him talk about himself in a way that was honest, open, not self-deprecating, but understanding the weaknesses that he had that people would call out, about, not being able to throw late in the years, not being able to throw the spiral, but all that stuff he overcame to get to where he was and all the hard work and stuff. Yeah. So it was a very interesting speech, not unlike some of the speeches you give, my friend.
They're definitely not about winning championships, that's for sure. But yes, I mean, I like to, I use the expression that if I can't educate, at least entertain. So, I like to go about the presentations that I do with some level of interest, entertainment, lighthearted, but educational, right? And taking things and kind of like bringing clarity, maybe something that's a little bit complicated, bringing clarity. It's like, I have the opportunity to talk to tens of thousands of MSPs every single year through my job worldwide. And what I want to do is leverage that experience. Like, what's working, what's not working, and where can I condense that into a message so that I can bring that to the whole channel. That's what I get most excited about, and that's what I try to incorporate into every presentation that I do, is just a little bit of that experience, so somebody's walking away with something, even if they're not interested in the company or the product that I work for.
All right. So let's get some crap out of the way first, because I know people are going to be like, "Oh, what's the most, important thing that has happened?" and blah blah blah. So let me just ask you, and you can tell me, what are probably the most asked questions that you're tired of answering now that you've made the decision?
Are we talking like career wise, or are we talking about just in the last couple of months?
Well, let's do the last couple of months, and then we'll see how it goes.
I don't get tired of answering anything. I'll be honest. Like I'm pretty transparent with everything that I do, and I think we have to be transparent, especially if we're serving this community we call managed services. There needs to be that level of transparency as to what's happening. And I've always been brutally honest when it comes to those types of things. So it's not so much that I get tired of answering questions. I will tell you one thing, actually. So there is this thing at PAX 8 that every time you're new, like when you're new, you have to come up with an interesting fact about yourself. And unfortunately, it's happening in every single meeting, because now they're introducing me to all the internal teams. So now every time I'm on a call, it's like, what's your interesting fact? I don't have like a Rolodex of interesting facts about me. As a matter of fact, a pretty boring individual. So, but I also hate repeating myself. So now I'm kind of like at the point where I'm gonna have to start making stuff up. And that's what I am tired of, is talking about, what's your interesting facts? What's your weird fact? That kind of stuff. But,
what's one thing about you that most people don't know? That type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. I just don't have enough of them to be able to share. It's not that I'm not willing to. I just don't have enough interesting things about me.
Well, have you talked about your love of chickens?
I have no love of chickens, Marv. This is, what this is. I had a conversation at an event once about, I do have 7 chickens, and I have these. They don't have names. They don't wear clothes. I don't care much about them. I take care of them. I made sure they're fed and watered, and they produce eggs. That's it. It's a cycle. It's just this thing. It's a hobby.
They serve a purpose.
Right. But then all of a sudden I've become the chicken guy of the channel. And I'm like, what is going on? The funny thing is, there's an old friend of mine, an MSP, who comes up to me, and it became this theme for this one event. Every time I was on stage, it was the chicken guy. And this MSP comes over to me and he goes, I actually have a chicken farm. I got 30,000 chickens, but I'm not going to tell anybody that, because I don't want anybody taking that chicken guy tag and putting that on me. So yeah, no, I don't have a love for chickens. I'll eat a chicken, I'll eat an egg, but there is no love.
Oh, fun stuff. Well, why don't we do this? Let's at least do a quick question about, I talked about when I first met you, that was kind of the pivoting moment in my career, when I took my business from this little break fix referral. We used what's the attorney's term? Retainer.
Retainer, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I would do with my attorney clients. They would pay a retainer. And I fell into the world of managed services and started to make that change and stuff. Now, you probably are considered, at least from what I have heard and talked about with people, one of the most passionate people for MSPs in our space.
Yeah.
But that's not something that you started with. You started off wanting to be a banker.
I was a banker. Well, so it's this whole thing, right? I grew up in Canada. My parents were very British. My grandparents were very British. I was first generation Canadian. Now, in England, and it's still true to this day, that a career in banking is a very solid, respectable career, and it's something that is it's elevated. They still have somewhat of a class structure going on there. And, my grandparents were very simple people. My parents were very simple people. And all of a sudden I get a job at a bank as a teller. And when I'm 15 years old, and all of a sudden they're like, this is like the greatest career ever. So, it was fun. It was interesting. I was young. I was moving up the ranks. I started as a teller. At the ripe old age of 18 was lending money, mortgages and loans, and got into the investment side of the house and just started really growing my career there. And then, I just came to the realization that, you got great job security doing these things. But it's pretty boring. And really, you're never going to get rich doing it. You're going to have a solid job, but you're not really going to get that rich. So I made the change to IT. It's an interesting story. There's a kid. I call him a kid. He's an adult now, but he came to me, and we were so being as young as I was in banking in the 90s. I was the first one to train people when I was a teenager on how to use ATMs, because the old biddies that worked at the bank weren't going to go and show people how to use ATMs because it was going to replace them. So they were terrified of this technology. I'm 15. I don't care. I'll take people out and show them how to use an ATM. I'm not worried about losing my job. So then that led to telephone banking, which led to the first internet banking. And it was a cool job because it was the first time where you could actually go online and check the balance of your account. Maybe you could transfer between two accounts. That's it. That's all you could do online. And you had to get a series of 12 discs in the mail in order to be able to do that. So, I was one of the first people in Canada doing that. And I had to hire because it was obviously taking off. And this kid comes by and I'm interviewing him and I'm looking at his resume, and he's 2 years in this industry and 2 years in this industry and 2 years in this industry. And he comes across my desk. And he says to me, I'm going to work for you for 2 years. And I'm like, why 2 years? And he goes, I don't know what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I'm giving everybody 2 years before I figure out what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I'm like, I got this kid. I'm going to get him to be a banker for the rest of his life. So I hired him because I'm going to convince him. 2 years comes up, guy quits. I'm like, dude, I was going to convince you that banking was this choice. It was the career. And he's like, no, it's just not for me. I'm off to go and try IT. So he actually got a job over at Compaq Computers. He called me up probably about 3 weeks later and said, you're one of the best managers that I ever worked for. Compaq is hiring for a sales manager. And I'm like, I know nothing about IT. And he's like, I don't care. They're looking for a good sales manager. If you're interested, I'll put your resume in. I went over for an interview on a lark, realized that I was going to do the same job, managing the same amount of people, but for double the money. And I'm like, no brainer. Let's go work in IT. And I remember my first day at Compaq, I had this team looking at me and they're like, I'm asked them, what do we do here? And they're like, we sell desktop servers and laptops. And I'm like, what's a server? And they're like, who the hell hired this guy?
Don't you know your DOS 622 disc? Come on.
So I cut my teeth back in the day selling ML380s and, the Compaq mobile devices.
For stereos.
Yeah. It was awesome. It was a beautiful company to work for and a great company to kind of cut your teeth in.
What did your parents say when you made the switch?
They didn't get it. They really didn't get it. I still remember my grandfather on his deathbed. He's like, you made me proud sticking it through with the bank. And I'm like, Grandpa, I'm in IT now. And he goes, I don't know what that is, but good luck with your banking career. Oh my God.
Oh my. Oh, goodness gracious. Well, as we start to transition into Tech Talk here, I do want to acknowledge we got some people in the chat here, including the great Diana Giles and Jerry Kutavis, who are talking about stuff that shouldn't be announced on a live podcast at the poker table, but that'll be another time. Thank you all for listening. As I mentioned, this is the weekly live show. We stream to Facebook, LinkedIn, and the YouTube. And for all things that you want to know about the IT Business Podcast, head over to a simple website, theitbusinesspodcast.com, and you can see where you can follow the show, hear past episodes, and do all sorts of good stuff. Now, if you find any of this stuff helpful and you want to support us, you can be like our sponsors, our presenting sponsor, NetAlly, your ally in the channel for all things network diagnostics. They produce some of the best handheld tools, everything from the LinkSprinter 300 up to the Etherscope NXG that can help you diagnose, test, design, and do all that stuff with your networks better, smarter, and faster. Head over to netally.com. And our live stream is brought to you by Computers Done Right, managed service provider here in Southwest Florida. Not only do they do great managed services, they can also help with your website and social media stuff. For all things that you need done, get Computers Done Right. All right, let's move into some good stuff. Just checking the chat here to see what else comes up. Blue Star Mortgage.
Yeah, it's Keith reminiscing about his old banking days. I want to relate to him. I want to think Keith is older than me, but I think we're about the same age.
He's more reminiscing about his Dallas Cowboys and the Blue Star.
Always, always.
All right. So let me ask this. This will be the last horrible question. But what was life like after you made the announcement? I assume that during your walkabout or sabbatical or whatever you called it, that, you know, you kind of hunkered down, ignored all the messages. You know, I would get a little tweet back every now and then, still here, no decision. But how's it been since the decision was made?
It's been absolutely amazing. It's been overwhelming, actually. It's been immensely overwhelming. And it's funny because you know, I take great pride in my relationship with the channel. I'm immensely humbled by the amount of attention I get. I don't know why I get as much attention as I do, because you know, you want to talk about imposter syndrome, what everybody talks about. I'm an idiot, but for some reason, people just like me, and I guess I'm relatable. But you know, and I'll just continue doing what it is that I do, because people stop and listen. I don't know why, but people stop and listen, and I really enjoy doing it. So the reaction was immensely overwhelming from a very positive perspective. I read every comment. I tried to reply to every comment. I obviously got a number of text messages. It was, I think I heard somewhere that I was actually trending on LinkedIn for a little while there, which is absolutely amazing considering our little pocket of IT and this little part of our world. So, you know, that for me is so flattering. I'm so overwhelmingly blessed by working for such an amazing channel with such thousands and thousands of amazing people. And it's a family. And, you know, you and I have hung around a couple of times together, and I know that if I ever need anything, I can call you and vice versa. And, you know, there's thousands of relationships like that in this channel. So, you know, I was hoping it was going to be newsworthy, and I'm glad that it's finally done, because I was getting a lot of questions. Where are you going? When are you announcing? What are you doing? I was obviously getting a lot of opportunities from some really, really good companies. And, you know, it's funny because, you know, I left Datto after close to 10 years of working there, and was trying to figure out what was next. And the easy thing, what I was thinking was to try to find the next Datto, like what is the next company that I can take from not startup, but like startup plus one into the realm that Datto was. You know, you get experience working with venture capitalists and private equities and going public and then going private again. So you gain all this experience, and, you know, where could I bring that? What's the next great product? What's the next great thing? What's the next great trend for us in the managed services space? And then all of a sudden, like some really cool opportunities came. Some service companies came about. Some media companies came about. Some consultants came about. I even got offers from private equities and VCs as consultations. So, you know, some really interesting kind of out of the box stuff started coming down. But then ultimately, at the end of the day, I want to be as close as I can to the MSPs. I want to be able to work hand in hand and be there for the MSPs as much as I possibly can. And at the end of the day, Pax8 was the best opportunity to do that, because they really do care about the MSPs. They were born in the managed services space. They're all, you know, very well known in the MSP space. They're investing tons of money in the MSP space, and they wanted me there to do nothing but what I have been doing and what I'm passionate about and what I love doing. So at the end of the day, it really was a no-brainer for me.
So it seems as though Pax8 is on that precipice that Datto seemed to be, because Datto, when it started, was, a startup that was doing quite well
Yep.
and needed that spark, which I think was you. And I could be wrong, but that's kind of my opinion there. And it seems like Pax8 was starting to hit a little plateau, but you could see there's an opportunity there for Pax8 to be, and I'll say this, I can see them being the Amazon of the channel.
Yeah. I would argue that it wasn't a plateau, because in my mind, and I've had this conversation with Nick Hetty and John Street and Ryan Walsh, was I don't know why you're calling me, because Pax8's everywhere and it's doing everything and it is growing like mad, and it seems like everybody is happy. Partners are happy. The staff are happy. Like, everybody just seems happy. And I don't think it's a plateau per se. I think, Mark, we just get to this point where, and I ran into this with Datto. We've been around long enough that everybody walks in the room and goes, oh, there's Datto. I know what Datto does. Meanwhile, we were expanding into many, many different services with the Autotask acquisition and RMM there. And we were investing quite a bit into future state cloud-based RMM. We're getting into SaaS protection, Azure backup, all these things. But nobody's coming and talking to us because I know Datto. I saw the pitch, I get them, I use them, what do I need to talk to them about? And I think, Pax8's done this awesome job of getting out and everybody knows who they are. But the thing is, though, they're so diversified on the services that they actually offer and the product set that they actually offer, that it's getting to the point where a lot of people aren't talking to us anymore because they'll walk in a room and I get it. Look, it's an MSP thing. If you go to a trade show and there's 100 vendors there and you have the chance to talk to 5 because of time constraints, you're going to go and talk to the 5 that aren't in your stack, or something you don't know anything about, or a new technology like super interesting, as opposed to going and talking to the vendors that you're already working with to see what's new over there. So, I think it's a condition more of that as opposed to a plateau, because if you look at their revenue generation, they have definitely not plateaued. If you look at the amount of services and products that they're offering these days, it's significant. It's growing significantly. I just don't think the message is getting out, and I think that's part of the reason why Nick wanted to bring me on board, was just to continue that. Hey, let's continue the momentum that we've got, and let's continue to build all these services that we've got to help our partners grow.
Could there be this misnomer? And I'll use myself as an example. So unofficially or officially, I'm a Pax8 partner, and I have been for years, I think since the end of 2016. I have never purchased anything through Pax8. Part of the reason is because when it came for me to look at what was offered and the stuff that I used, the margins weren't any different. They were basically the same. So I couldn't see a reason for me to make a switch, because the only advantage at that time was, well, you have a single portal for purchase. I'm like, I don't need a single portal for purchase. That's no big deal. So I've not had very many conversations with Pax8 since, although I did get an email today of my new account manager. I don't know if you sicked him on me or not, but I got that.
Not at all. Not at all. I'm terrified you're going to ask me a question. I've been there for 5 days, Marvin. Don't ask me the question of what value does Pax8 bring.
No, but in terms of the perception, like you said, yes, everybody knows Pax8. We know the wingman stuff. We know, they're going to try to compete with Datto for best, vendor at a conference and stuff. And you're right. We're going to go to vendors we don't know. So is it something about trying to get re-engaged in the community?
I don't think it's necessarily re-engaged, because again, if I think you're somewhat of a unique entity from the perspective that you signed up and haven't talked about it since, because there are a lot of advantages. And again, I've only been there for a couple of days, so I'm just learning the value add for the average MSP. But single billing, single support, those kinds of things are of huge advantages. And I think that if you actually just took a moment, Marvin, you'd probably see the reason why there's 15,000 MSPs worldwide that are using this service day in and day out. That's not just people that have signed up and aren't using it like yourself. Those are people that are utilizing it every day. I did a lot of research before I joined Pax8. I talked to a lot of MSPs, ones that love them and ones that don't love them, and ask those pointed questions. You know, what is it that you love about them? Why is it that you do business with them? I found really couldn't find anybody that had a lot of negative things to say. So in my mind, that was the same thing I did when I joined Datto. I think that again, it's the problem that we all have. They're expanding the services that they offer with the C-level Rex Frank's organization, with the C-level acquisition. They now have like an entire arm of professional services and training and peer groups and all those types of things to be able to help MSPs grow their businesses. I mean, it's a significant part of the business, and a lot of it is done at extremely affordable, if not free rates, to help MSPs again grow their businesses. And you got tons of people on that team like Rex Frank and Jeremy Nelson and David that are all kind of Shaffron, who are all consulting with the channel day in and day out. Why would they want to do that? Why would Pax8 want to do that? And it's just simply, again, to help the MSP channel grow. So ultimately you'll consume more services from them in particular. On top of that, you look at individuals like Matt Lee, who I think is on this call. Shocked if he wasn't. Yep. But Matt's running around talking about security and what Pax8 is doing from a security perspective. Like, there's some massive opportunities to engage with the channel. So I don't know if it's necessarily a re-engagement would be the right word, but let's talk about enhancing or talking about that engagement more and more. And I think I can help there.
Okay. So I will bring up a couple of quick comments from the chat that may help. Keith writes, I see Pax8 as a labor savings play. The margin in commodity sales is always slim. Pax8 saves time on purchasing, billing, support.
Right.
And then Eric writes, I see part of the value of Pax8 that it allows partners to buy the way they want rather than follow some of the crazy contract terms from vendors. Now that I have heard.
But you're not using them.
Because I don't have crazy contract terms either. So I'm not stuck. All of my contracts are month to month, except for 2 that I just recently did, which one is ActiveTrack. I mean, that's, if Pax8 is selling ActiveTrack, I didn't know it.
But you have to admit, and it's a hot topic on all the Reddit feeds right now is contract terms and vendors being MSP friendly. Look, I'm spinning this back on you. Do you select vendors based on friendly contract terms? Like in your stack rank of choosing a vendor, where does friendly contract terms come up? Is that number 1? Is it number 10?
I would say it is probably top 5. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say it's number 1. Because if I select the right vendor, if I select the right product for my client, I'm not going to have to worry about the contract. Because I'll either have the contract with the client that they know.
Yeah.
And look, if you want to quit early, we are on the hook for this. I mean, we're doing the same thing with 365 right now.
Yeah.
So it can be done. The problem is I think if it's a 3-year deal and I find out in month 3 that it sucks, I want to weigh out. But there are vendors that provide that for us. And so I think here's the thing. A lot of the things that we do in this space aren't very different from each other.
Yep, I agree.
I mean, so it is a matter of how do I feel about it? Is it going to save me money? Is it going to save me time? And there's a lot of times, look, I haven't switched here. Okay, for example, Enable. That's who I use for my RMM, my patching, my antivirus. I haven't moved from them when probably half the channel did because they work for me.
Right.
And moving to another provider, at least in the last couple of years, wasn't going to save me much money. So I wasn't going to spend the time to make that change because it worked for me. Now they just announced, I don't know, 9% price increase, but everybody's announcing an increase. Syncro had an increase back in November. I know Autotask and RMM have had increases. So, I mean, everybody's increasing money. So you got to find the partner that works for you. And the chat just lit up, I know. Oh, my goodness gracious. So let's look at it let me ask you a question from this perspective, because I know that MSPs, when they're looking at vendors to choose, and there's a huge market that it's all about the price. I don't want to be, I want to, be charged as little as possible so I can make as much as possible. I don't look at it that way. I look at it as, what's best for me and my client to support their networks, to keep them safe, and to help them make money and stay with me for as long as they can. Most of my clients have been with me, well, 10 plus years, because I've got some that are low, but my oldest client, 25 years.
Yeah.
And I'm losing one now only because they got absorbed by another company.
Yeah.
And they were fighting to try to find a way to keep me. So that's what I want out of my clients. But in terms of from a vendor perspective, what do you see as a prototypical MSP that you would want to partner with?
So I'm going to disagree with you that to a certain extent, price does not even come into the conversation, right? And there's a certain level of maturity that our market and the managed service providers have. We've kind of grown up over the last 10 years, I would say, probably even a little bit longer than that, where it used to be. So I mean, you talk about like you were a reseller at one point in time, right? And when we were, and I was on the vendor side of that reseller relationship when I worked for Compaq and then HP for a little bit. So this is all pre-managed services. And in that world, you fought for scraps. Like you tried to get the best margin on hardware that you possibly could. And that meant whether it was reselling Compaq or IBM or HP or Dell, like you would go and find who's going to give me the best margin, and that's who you would go and sell. Loyalty wasn't a thing. Loyalty wasn't a thing from the vendor perspective either. I'll tell you, Marvin, one of the first things that I learned when I got into IT, somebody came over to me and said, we sell to resellers. And I thought immediately that's some derogatory term for these people that are out selling IT. And because I just felt like reseller just felt and screams like middleman. So, there was this almost disdain for the channel from that perspective. And it was like, don't trust them. They will shop they'll shop your margin around. They'll shop your deal around. They will take the best, cheapest product, that kind of thing. There was no relationship back then. So, for me, over the course of what I feel like managed services did was it kind of gave us this restart where we could figure out how we can all kind of work together on this stuff. And there's still crappy vendors that are out there, but you got to admit that there's better vendors now from a relationship standpoint than there ever has been in the IT channel. And I'm talking about the relationship between those that are producing the products and services to those that are actually delivering the products and services, which would be the vendors in this space and the MSPs in this space. So I think that, price is important. Margin is important. But at the same time, I think we're getting smarter and better that it's not always about, I'm going to make an extra penny over here. Instead, there's other conversations like, what's the innovation going to look like? We just had a conversation about contract terms. How MSP friendly are they? Where is this market going and what is this vendor going to do for that? Security is a big part of the conversation. If you had, would you want to go with an organization that invests in securing its own products or an organization that has never invested in securing its products? This one's going to be a little more expensive. You mentioned Syncro increasing its price. Syncro's increasing its price because it's ready to take the next leap as an RMM vendor to do a lot more around support and innovation of the actual product. They just need more money to do that. So, this is where you can justify and kind of mitigate why somebody would increase their price and why the price conversation, if you look at the average MSP, like what are the top things? Innovation of the product, account management, relationship. Sometimes you can get that money back and even MDF funds. So there's other ways of mitigating price, if that makes any sense.
It does, because I use that argument with my clients all the time. It's not about price. It's about the value and it's about the support. Mm-hmm. And listen, they have no problems raising their price when they do stuff. And I work with attorneys, so they do it all the time.
Yep.
but then they always want to push back when I have to raise my price.
Of
You know, I
course.
had an attorney that he would always say, Mavi, I got to eat. And I'm like, so do I. You know, I'm not going to eat at McDonald's just because you want to go eat at Ruth Chris. Come on, let's
Yeah.
be reasonable here.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, I understand that. And, you know, price is not the motivator, but we still have an industry where the consumers, the end users, still push back on price because they don't get it. You know, they think that the commoditization of tech should, you know, transcend everything, including support. So we still have to educate them.
Mhm.
And then we still have those that have not grown up with us.
Mhm.
And when I say with us, because, you know, back in 2012, you know, I wasn't doing MSP services. I was doing remote and being cheap like everybody else. And then I realized I can't do that. So here I am now, and I'm stuck. I consider myself stuck in the middle because I relate to those, but then I also know, you know, to be a nice MSP, you got to do these things and work with these vendors. So, you know, that's kind of where I get stuck on both sides.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I can understand that. And this is still a journey that we're all on. As mature as the US or the North American market around managed services is, it's still a journey. But I'm telling you, like I've built my entire career based on relationships. And you know, people like to do business with people they like and that they can rely on and that they can call when, you know, when things go sideways. You know, that's I think there's some value there in regards to price, and I think you can mitigate that with the end users. We're kind of at this moment here where MSPs are having to go back to their end users and charge more than ever before, especially now that we're adding more and more security vendors to the stacks. So this is not just a problem that vendors have in relationships with MSPs. This is a problem that MSPs are going to have in relationships with their end users. We're all going to figure this out. We're all going to make more money at the end of the day. It's just going to take some time. It's going to take some pain, and nobody wants to hear you're too expensive, because you know, Marvin, there are how many guys in your market that could go to every single one of your customers and offer a cheaper price. You're not the cheapest person in your market. I guarantee that.
Yeah.
So
I find that all the time. Guys come in and want to, you know, oh, we can do that at half the price. And my client's like, really? Can you do this, this, and this? Well, we can only provide you support from 10 a.m. to 12 noon.
on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
Out of India.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me circle back, because you made a point there about relationships, and it goes back to the question that you asked earlier about, you know, how in the world did you get so popular? And I think the reason is the conversation that you and I are having right now is a very real, honest conversation. I do think that because you didn't start out in tech, you probably know how to dumb it down for the people that aren't techie, but you know enough to really dig in the weeds with the rest of us. You're not afraid to be blunt and talk truth, and that's what we need in this industry. Is that fair?
That's fair, but I'm also very respectful of what it is that we do. You know, blunt sometimes comes across as fairly arrogant. We have enough arrogant people in our space. I'm very humble with what it is. Blunt isn't the word I would use. I would say, you know, I like to go in the dark corners that people tend not to want to go into. You know, let's talk about the things that keep you up at night. People tend to avoid and want to avoid, especially in the IT space, want to avoid those conversations. You know, I'll give you a perfect example. We talk about this a lot, where MSPs, especially the business owners for MSPs, became kind of accidental entrepreneurs. And, you know, they didn't necessarily want to run a business and deal with HR and payroll and all these and the people aspect of it. They just want to run an IT shop. They just want to, you know, play around with tech. My wife started a business just before the pandemic. She's an interior decorator, and she decided to do this on her own and start her own business. So all of a sudden the business is growing. She has no idea what to price it. She has no idea how to generate recurring revenue. She has no idea what accountant to use, what lawyer to use, how to register the business, how to, you know, price her services, how to go to market with it, how to sell it and market it. Then she starts hiring people because she's growing like crazy, but she doesn't know how. And then all of a sudden it's like, it's such a conversation is so similar to that of an MSP, because it's not the MSP or the interior decorator, it's all the other crap that we have to manage around it. You know, a lot of vendors talk about, especially when it comes to vendor management, we talk about the vendors that are in your stack, and we talk about 12 to 14 vendors that you have to work with. When you actually add in how many vendors that an MSP has to work with beyond the tech in their stack, it's actually about like 35, because you have payroll vendors and accounting software and all this other crap that you have to deal with on top of, hey, I just wanted to play around with tech all day.
Yep.
So, you know, I'm immensely respectful of that. So I think, Marvin, I kind of come at it from a different approach. I watch vendors talk to MSPs about speeds and feeds on technology. And I get it. You know, we're nerds, we're geeks. We want to know the speeds and feeds of technology, but I can get you those. You know, I can get you those in a demo. I can get you those in a white paper, a YouTube video, whatever. That's easy. The difficult part is, how do I price this? What do I say to my end user when I'm telling them I have to increase their price? What do I say, you know, like, what do I say when I have to now add these new EDR services in that they've never paid for before? And how are they going to understand it? And the reason, you know, I say dumb it down, because what happens is MSPs also have a tendency to complicate the conversation with their end users. And end users, I actually relate probably more to how an end user is than to how an MSP works, which means if an MSP comes to me and says, hey, I'm going to sell you this and this and this, and I'm going to give you all these speeds and feeds, and I'm going to show you a beautiful report coming out of Rapid Fire Tools, I'm like, dude, I don't get it. Like, just leave this, you know, I don't understand. So it's that translation of, here's what you're going to say, here's what they're going to respond with, here's how you overcome that objection. That's kind of, in my mind, the way I kind of tackle it. So a lot of the value add is me just more or less trying to translate more than anything else. And I agree. Like, there's nothing I can teach you about tech, Marvin. Like, you're and every MSP is going to know more about tech than I do. I'm not passionate about tech. I don't understand tech. Austin McCord used to yell at me for months on end because there was a data device sitting on my desk and I didn't even know how to turn it on. And he's like, you sell this crap every single day. And I'm like, I don't need to know how to turn it on. The MSPs know how to turn it on. What I need to do is teach the MSPs how to sell it to an end user. That's the part that they're missing. That's the part where I can help. And that's where I've kind of translated that in. I have been absolutely passionate about this MSP space since day one, because I knew, you know, this was our little dark, it was at one point, it was our little dark corner of the channel. And we were going to sit here and we were going to be happy and nobody was going to bother us. And the odd time a big vendor would come down and scoop up a vendor in our space and then run off with them and start selling them in enterprise. But we were all kind of like still just here doing our own thing. And then we started getting good at it and we started making money at it. And then all of a sudden, the VCs and the PEs started paying attention. And then all of a sudden, acquisitions started happening, mergers started happening, MSPs started merging. We have telcos coming in trying to buy MSPs. You know, we have print dealers trying to figure out how they're going to stay relevant as time goes on. You know, we've got the larger vendors that are coming down, and instead of scooping up these technologies to take up market, they're staying here because, you know, I belong to some executive peer groups for IT go-to-market people, channel chiefs. And there's very large enterprise IT vendors that come to me. I'm the managed services whisperer in these circles. And they come to me and they say, how do I sell to MSPs? Because right now, like never before, I'm calling and we're calling into these end users, and these end users more and more are turning to us going, I'm not working with you. I use a managed service provider. Call them. And then, of course, this vendor calls the MSP and the MSP goes, you don't have a channel program. You sell direct. You don't care about me. I have my own technology. Don't worry about it. I got this taken care of. Have a nice day. So these vendors are like, how do I sell to these MSPs? And I'm like, very simple. Let them sell their brand because it's not your brand. You're just one member of a stack and you got to give them tons of margin. And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, then you're never going to sell through the MSPs, right? So there is this battle right now that I'm seeing, and it's more than ever before. And actually, while I was off work there for the few months, I did some consulting, and it was mostly for private equities and VCs that want to put their money into the MSP space, and they're trying to figure out how to do it. There is still billions, Marvin, billions.
Oh,
When
yeah.
you and I first started talking, 2015, did you ever imagine the billions of the investment dollars coming into our space?
No, not
Absolutely not. Not even close.
No.
Now,
And
pretty
here's the thing. So was it last week, or I just talked about a vendor and they're a part of our space, Splashtop, because they're used in some of the RMM tools and some of the vendors that wanted to try to get in and have MSPs sell their platform. And that was the middle of last year. And now they're out. And I don't know what happened and here's the thing. I don't know why they wanted to get in, because they had a pretty good stronghold with selling their product already. So then they get in. I don't know why they got out. And it is a weird thing right now. So a lot of people, yes, they're dipping their toe in, probably because there's money.
Yep.
And how do we get our piece?
Yep.
And we're thinking, listen, don't come in here and muddy the waters.
Yeah. I think there's some of that in there. It's funny there, because there are vendors that come and try to get into this MSP space, and when I do run into them, and actually, when a lot of my peers get hired by these companies, because all of a sudden this company who has had some success selling direct, or maybe into the enterprise reseller market, and now, or telco, like master agents and agents, and now all of a sudden they want to get into the MSP space. My advice to them is always, you got to give it 2 years. And I saw this firsthand when I started working at Level Platforms. This is way back in the day. I would go to this peer group meeting and no one would talk to me. No one would pay any attention to me. Everybody would just kind of like walk by me. And then, but I kept going. It was a quarterly meeting, and I kept going and I kept going and I kept going for 2 years before finally somebody stopped and talked to me. Like they didn't even want to have a conversation with me. And it's a condition of our place, because what happens is we've been burnt before. And there is nothing worse, Marvin, than me coming to you as a brand new vendor. I got some cool tech. I sell it to you. You go to your end user and sell it to your end user. And then 3 months later, I send you a note going, you know what? This isn't working. I'm going to take off and go back to enterprise. So long. And now you got to A, get out of your contract, B, figure out what the hell you're going to do with this tech, C, you got to go back to your end user and explain why you screwed up on this brand new vendor that you thought was going to be super cool, and resell them something else. And then all of a sudden that ruins the relationship that you have with us. Unfortunately, we saw that too many times. And I'm sure in your head right now, you're probably rhyming off all the vendors that just closed up in the middle of the night, no warning. And who's holding the bag? The MSPs.
Yep.
So I learned very early in this, you got to be around, and you got to be around for a while. It's the Zig Ziglar, analogy. Nobody wants to be first in line. Nobody wants to be last in line, but nobody wants to be first in line. And you have to figure out how to create that relationship and show the channel that you're serious about it. We're going to be around forever. We've got this investment. We've been here. We're going to continue to be here. We're going to continue to invest. So when vendors come to me and say, I want to get into the managed services market, I'm going to say, you're going to lose money for 2 years. And then all of a sudden, people will start trusting you, because it's about consistency and it's about messaging. Nobody wants to be first in line. And, we've been burnt by that in the past. And I think that's part of the reason why there's this difficulty in getting into our space. We're finicky people in the managed services space.
We are. And a quick little note. So we do have somebody in the green room that is keeping us on track. And of course, I mentioned Splashtop, and it is, I don't know if you knew this, Rob, but Splashtop is scheduled to go live on your platform at the end of March.
Awesome. I did not know that. Good.
So things you can learn while you're here. And another thing to note, you mentioned Level Platforms. I wasn't going to bring that up, except I will bring it up now and ask you, did you know that if you go to ChatGPT and ask about Rob Ray,
no,
it says that you were the founder of Level Platforms?
I definitely was not. The founder of Level Platforms was a gentleman by the name of Peter Sanford, who's still kicking around the MSP space. Every once in a while, I've seen Peter pop up. It definitely was not the founder of Level Platforms.
That's why you can't trust ChatGPT.
Cool. If I was the founder, I would have done things a little bit differently. You know, that organization, if I can, like, I don't get a chance to talk about Level too many times because it's 10 years old now. Plus, you know, you think about that team, that's Dan Wensley, who's now over at ScalePad. That's, you know, myself. That's Sean Sweeney, who's over at ConnectWise. You know, Mike Campion was there. He was at Adigy. He's just moved on to PIA, I think is where he's working for now. You know, there's Barry Hall, Marty Lefebvre, Urvish Badiani, Ray Setowans over at ConnectWise, all those guys over at Datto. That organization, as much as it isn't around anymore, but that was kind of the foundation, like that RMM, early days RMM. All those guys that work there are still, Alicia Vetter is still, you know, over at ASCII. They were all still kicking around the channel. It was a nice little feeder company for all these channel companies now. And think about some of those people have got almost 15, 20 years of managed services experience. Pretty cool.
So that is interesting. You say that all those people still doing big things in the channel. Level Platforms ended up getting bought by AVG.
Correct.
And they kind of poo-pooed it, I think.
No, AVG then sold it to Avast, and then Avast ended up selling it to Barracuda MSP.
Oh, okay.
So Barracuda RMM is the old managed workplace, Level Platforms managed
AVG Workplace. I remember that. Yeah. Used it for a couple of months. All right. Well, Rob, we could go on for quite some time, but I want to save some of this for our post-show chat for those that stay with us. Did you prepare for Florida Man or Random Question?
So I saw it. I didn't know what I needed to prepare, but I'm pretty quick on my feet. So,
well, you live up there in the good state of Connecticut.
Alicia Vetter just jumped in there. Is happy I mentioned her name.
Yeah, it's a great podcast now. So, I mean, you know, Florida Man, right? The whole.
Yeah, of course.
So the question is, when I started, I don't know how I even started doing this, but it came about as somebody saying there's nobody that can outdo Florida Man. And so I put forth this Florida Man challenge that each week we would come up with stories. So you would find a local story that happened in your area, but it had to be recent. It couldn't have been like 10 years ago, you know, but like what's happened in the last 48 to 72 hours in your area that could challenge a Florida Man story that happened in the last 48 to 72 hours. And just to give you an idea, this happened yesterday. Florida man fatally shoots clerk at Kentucky hotel. So we can't even contain ourselves to the state of Florida. So a Florida man is accused of fatally shooting a clerk at a hotel in Western Kentucky after assaulting two people outside the business who couldn't give him a cigarette lighter.
That's awesome. I took a trip with some friends during the pandemic out to Napa Valley, and I actually ripped off your idea, and I got in super late from somewhere, and I had to leave super early, so going to sleep wasn't the option. So I had about 4 hours to kill. So I created a PowerPoint deck, stole your idea, and created a PowerPoint deck of Florida Man. Okay. Basically took, again, articles, and then we played this game. Is it from Florida or is it not from Florida? So there is a Connecticut one in there. It's not a recent one, but I will give you the one that was from Connecticut was man opened fires on ghost in his own home.
Okay, I could see that happening.
Shooting at a ghost in your own house.
Yeah. Sure. All right. Well, I'll let that story go. I was going to throw out a random question at you, but
go ahead, man. Let's go.
Go ahead
with the random question.
Okay. All right. Here we go. Let me get to the random question generator and see what pops up here. And these are anything. So let's see. Here we go. generate. What part of your body currently doesn't feel 100%?
Okay, so literally you cut out there, whether it was my Wi-Fi. All I heard is 100% of my body. What's the question?
The question is, what part of your body currently doesn't feel 100%?
Jesus, Marvin. Who wants to know that? Like who wants
It's a
You know
random
what it
question.
is? I'll give it to you. My eyes. I take great pride. I am over 50 years old, and I have had 20/20 vision up until about 3 weeks ago, and then all of a sudden my eyes just seemed to quit. I was bragging about it. And then all of a sudden, I cannot read a damn thing. I
Yeah,
really.
well, you see the glasses in my hand, and I
Mhm.
was pretty similar. I don't know if it was right before 50 or right after 50, but
Just on a dime. It just happened, and
yeah.
it's like so disappointing and so frustrating. But yeah.
So, since my internet is being so Comcastic, let's do one quick thing because I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about some upcoming events for PAX 8 and beyond. Will be
Beyond.
happening this June in Denver, Colorado, June 11th through the 13th. So, quickly tell us what's going to be happening there.
So this is PAX 8's first user conference. And I love user conferences more so than, I love conferences, period. I love all the trade shows, but user conferences tend to be the one where you're going to get the most guts out of the vendors that you actually invest quite a bit in. And I remember back in the day, some of the best events that I ever went to were the Ingram Micro and the Cynics and the Tech Data events, because the distributors were the ones that kind of covered everything off. And I envision that this, and by the way, I own this project. So if anybody knows or has been to an event that I have managed, you know that I do it with nothing but class and respect. And I make sure that it's educational. I make sure that it's fun. And I want to create it in a way where you're going to want to keep coming back. And Beyond is going to be no different. So we have 1,000 MSPs coming to Denver, Colorado, June 11th through the 13th. It's going to be at the Gaylord. We have a lot of top vendors that are coming. We're going to create this ecosystem working, and it's exclusively managed service providers. And over the years, my goal is to make this the go-to event. And I would love nothing more than if I can get my MSPs to support me out and go and register for Beyond.
All right. And
there it is. Beautiful.
Putting up the website there, pax8beyond.com. We'll have that link in the show notes. And registration is open now. Early registration ends March 31st. And I don't know why your person threw Peyton Manning in there. Is Peyton Manning going to be your keynote speaker?
Believe it or not, Peyton Manning is the keynote speaker. Why don't we started with Peyton Manning? Now we're going to end with Peyton Manning. Understand. Okay, so I inherited a lot of things coming into this. Peyton Manning is a phenomenal human being. I'm not a big fan of having sports and athletes guys doing keynotes, but he is a great speaker. You've met him. I've met him. He is phenomenal. But this is also in Denver, Colorado. He's a big Denver. Was a big Denver Bronco for a while. So it fits very well into the conference, and he is a great keynote. So,
all right. And I just took down the picture. I'll throw it back up there for those that are watching the video. But who came up with this design? This Independence Day or Star Trek Borg attacking the Earth?
No. It's the other way. So it's like we're attacking space. We're going beyond for 23. The problem is that it does look like the laser's coming to Earth, but technically the laser is leaving Earth. Yeah, I know. Scroll down a bit. There's a much better picture of there it is, right there.
Yeah. Okay, what does that picture look like? It's from 2014.
I'm definitely not from 2014. I was about 50 pounds lighter. So, yeah.
Oh my. Okay. Well, let me get these things off the screen here. This is great for live. All right. So, Rob, I want to thank you. First of all, I didn't think you'd show up. Or
Shut
let me rephrase that. I didn't think you'd agree to come on the show because I figured there would be so many other big media types that would want to rope you as a first interview after making your announcement. But thank you.
I love this more. You know that, Marvin. You know that. You know I love doing this way more than I love doing that. This is easier, and yeah, it's more fun.
Yeah, we can talk more freely. I don't have attorneys, breathing down my neck or anything like that. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. If you are watching the live show, hang with us. We'll do a little post show after the fact. If you're listening by audio, thank you for downloading and subscribing. And if you are new to the show, head over to itbusinesspodcast.com/follow. Find whatever podcatcher or video thing that you want to subscribe to. We're on just about all of them, and you can be notified when the shows come out either by video or audio. And you just heard a great conversation with my buddy and pal, Rob Tiberius Ray.
I've heard that before too.
So that's going to do it. Again, head over to the website. Go back and listen if you haven't already. Sean Lardo came on and talked about Pitch It last week. I also had a great diversity podcast. And tune in next week as we're going to have one of the finalists for last year's Pitch It, Alert Ops, a new vendor in the channel, and we'll learn all about them. So that'll be next week on the live show. And that's going to do it. Thank you all for downloading, subscribing, listening, supporting, all that good stuff. We'll see you next time. And until then, holla. All right, and we are off the audio onto the post show. We had a lot of comments that I didn't get to. Let me see. Let's see. There was one. Oh, Dinah Giles had said back when we were talking about Pax8, in my opinion and experience, Pat8 genuinely supports the MSP in their business. Mine has definitely grown because of them.
And it need to do more and more and more of that. So that's good. That's excellent.
Yep. Keith actually put a comment into that said price is nothing compared to labor and the value. #charge more.
True story. But it's one of the more difficult things that you can possibly do because you're always terrified of getting the no.
You know what's funny is one of my first experiences back probably 2010-ish. I was chatting with another attorney about my large client that I thought was just being a pain in the butt. And this is back when I was charging $60 an hour.
Oh my God.
And that was the retainer. And I forget how many hours I had on them a month. And we were talking about billing, and she was telling me, well, I bill this, and, we were talking about all the different strategies. And if I would travel out of town to go to one of the branch offices, I would only bill for the time that I was working and for travel time and miscellaneous expenses. And she made the comment of like, you should be charging 24 hours. And I'm like, what? She goes, you're away from your home for 24 hours. Bill for it. And I said, okay. And she was the one who told me, raise your price. And if they don't say no, then you were charging too little.
Very true. That's very true.
And I raised it from 60 to 95. And they were like, they did their little, oh, you kidding me? That's a 40% increase, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, well, this is what I'm providing you. And I had them for another 8-9 years. So
yeah, it's it's something that I think the MSP space has gotten a lot more confident at. I use the example of my wife starting this business. You'll love this. So, you know, she starts it again. She's charging, I think, $50 an hour. I'm telling her $150 an hour. She's doing $50 an hour. And 3 or 4 interior designers around Connecticut reached out to her and offered to get together and have lunch. And she's thinking, this is great. I'm now in the inner circle of interior designers. No, it was an intervention. You need to raise your prices because you are destroying our businesses by offering it way too cheap. And started giving her advice on how much she should be charging. And immediately she went back and increased her prices. Nobody's ever said no.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, that's a good thing that they actually brought her in to talk to her. Whereas in our industry, you know, there's times where MSPs are like, you know, get out of here, trunk slammer.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe we need to try it a little bit different. We need to maybe sit them down and offer some advice.
All right. So here's a question that Giles is going to ask. And this is partly because I made a comment on one of my shows. Now, granted, it was in a post show. I don't think it was live on the podcast, where you were out at Denver at their security event last summer. And I made the comment that, oh, yeah, Rob's going to be at PAX 8. And it was like, no, you can't say that. So she's asking, did you already know you were going to PAX 8 when we saw you at the Denver hotel bar for the security conference?
Okay, so clarification. I was not at that security conference. 100% was not at the security conference. It was an absolute coincidence. I walked into that bar. So in Denver, there's a Marriott called the Tech Marriott. And I'm thinking, I'm in Denver. I was in Denver for a couple different reasons. I was visiting some friends. My daughter's doing some university tours. And I was in Denver, and there's a Tech Marriott. I'm like, this is cool. I'll just go to this Tech Marriott. Anyways, I walk into the bar, and I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I look around and I recognize half of the people in the bar because there was an MSP security event that was going on in the same bar. I was not at the event. I didn't even know the event was happening. But the question is, did you already know that you were going to PAX 8? No. We all talk. I've known Nick Hetty and Ryan Walsh for 12 years. As a matter of fact, I actually tried to get them to stop doing the PAX 8 thing and come work for me over at that Datto, right? So, long back when they were first getting started. So, these things, they're just ongoing conversations all the time. We all know each other. We all kind of are interconnected. But no, I had numerous opportunities and I talked about it before in various ways. And I was more or less trying to decide, did I want to go work for a vendor? If I did I want to work for a startup vendor? Did I want to work for an established vendor? And I was going through that whole process between October 31st and when I finally decided PAX 8, which literally was at the end of January, and signed on for Feb 1. So
was it meant to coincide with your birthday?
It had nothing to do with that. After all these years, it doesn't really matter. Birthdays. But no, actually, Feb 1 was the day it came out. What happened to be my wife's birthday. So, I'm getting more attention than she is on her birthday because of the change in the announcement. So,
yeah. Is she happy now that you're back out of the house after those couple of months, or?
Yes and no.
She's sad.
Yes and no. I mean, me, I travel for a living. I love traveling. I love being out in the MSPs. Me, I hang out with you guys until late in the evening and up first thing in the morning. It's something I'm super passionate about. I just have a lot of fun at it. Obviously I miss home, and, our kids are a little bit older. It was funny because pandemic hits and all of a sudden we're locked down. I'm not traveling. And, I've been doing this since we first met. So she's just used to me not being around except for weekends. And she, during the pandemic was panicking a little bit because she was trying to figure out, is this going to work? Like, when you retire, am I going to want you around 7 days a week? Fortunately, and she told me this at the end of the pandemic, she said, I actually really enjoyed having you home. I wasn't sure I was going to. So the last kind of 2 years have been a test as to whether I was going to stay with you or not. I'm like, you didn't even tell me. Like, I didn't even know I was taking this test. So fortunately I passed the test, but You know what? Pax8's on a very accelerated path for growth. There's massive opportunity. And Marvin, what's kind of cool is that MSPs are fairly mature in the US market, the Canadian market, Australia, and Western Europe. There's now Eastern Europeans are starting to get into and talking about managed services. I was spending a lot of time in Southeast Asia before the pandemic, as the the Thai, the Vietnamese, the Filipinos, Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, they're all talking about managed services. They're all trying to figure it out. So, for me, spending a lot of time actually teaching people again what managed services is and trying to get the world to adopt this as an SMB strategy is super cool. So she knows I'm going to be on the road quite a bit. And that's, Pax8's expanding in those markets rapidly. I'm excited to be back out there.
So that means that you're going to be out of the country a lot too.
I was, 2018, 2019, as we were growing Datto internationally, more than likely, yeah. But I'll still lose my money to you at the ASCII poker games. Don't worry about that.
I was going to say, it's nice when I come home with some cash and the all
right. Yeah. What's this K thing? Yeah. Thanks, Marvin.
Oh, man. What was that? I had another question that I was going to ask you that seemed to be a little... Well, of course, now you kind of talked about it a little bit because, of course, I'm sure the big question was always, why Pax8? Most people assume that Pax8 was probably one of the few vendors that could afford you. Now,
yes and no. I mean, you kind of get to a point in your career. I've been very blessed. Austin was very generous when I started with Datto and giving away equity. He was for a lot of us. He started an equity package where every employee at Datto on day one got equity. So there comes a point where, if you look at the growth in the MSP space and what all these vendors are doing, it becomes more about the equity play. I didn't join Datto, a little 40-person Connecticut-based backup company, because Austin could pay me a good salary. It was because of the equity play. And, I think that there's a lot of great small companies out there that couldn't necessarily afford the salary, but could afford to give a little bit more on equity. And then that means that we as employees have stake in the game as well and want to go out there and grow this company and grow this company and grow this company, where the equity is just going to offset how much you're ever going to make in salary. So it wasn't so much a conversation about who could afford me at this particular moment. It was about who more is excited about growth and really wants to go into hyper growth mode.
Is that a model that you think we as MSP should start to look at as well? Because that's always the fight with getting and hiring, is that nobody's going to care about the business like we do, mainly because they don't have skin in the game.
Yeah.
And how do we get our employees to have some sort of ownership? I'm going through that this year. I'm re-imaging my business. And part of it is when I, hire my next tech, do I provide them a package that incentivizes them to stay?
I think it depends on what your ultimate end game is. I mean, Datto was able to, as a vendor, to go public and get into the billions of dollars. Although MSPs are growing like crazy, it depends on what the end game is. I'm running into and having conversations with $100-200 million MSPs, and these are full blown companies, corporations that are hundreds of employees across the country with infrastructure and shareholders and boards and all that stuff. It depends on what your growth plan is, what you want to do with the business, but you also have to have a plan, because if you give me a little piece of nothing and with no plan to say, hey, we're going to turn this into $100 million, or we're going to turn this into $200 million, or we're going to turn this into $100,000, like, it's meaningless unless you kind of have some type of path that you can explain to them. You want to see a growth pattern, and more or less, like, what's your end game? you're not going to be on this earth forever. You're probably not going to want to own your managed service provider forever. What's your end game? And what's your employees tie into that end game? Meaning, if you sell this business for X dollars, are you going to give them a piece of all that? Or is Marvin right off into the sunset with all that money and they keep their jobs with whoever the new owner is? Do they get an opportunity to take the business? I've seen that a few times where some MSP business owners have sold the business to their own employees, and their own employees have kind of taken over from that perspective. So, I think it depends on what your end game is.
Yeah. Well, I will figure that out hopefully this year. My plan right now is to work till 89 and die at 99.
Nice. I don't know if I like it just so succinct. I don't, there's no room for error in there.
It's I just need to outlive the wife. That's the plan right now. Look at Sean Lardo peeking in here. Hey, Sean.
Of course.
Probably heard his name when I mentioned it at the end of the show. Somebody probably texted him. Dude. All right. Well, Rob, let's go ahead and end off the live show here. Thank you all for those that are hanging out and staying. And Rob and I are going to chat a little bit, and we'll see you all next week. Good night.